Om Shri Swami Samartha, Om Sai Baba. I'm starting this video today on Friday. I know I said Thursday, but today I felt like reading one more chapter, so here I go. I'm reading from Sri Sai Charitra, and the chapter is chapter number 4, called Descent of Sai Samartha in Shirdi. Remember, Sai Baba is also called Sri Sai Samartha also. So my obeisance to Sri Ganesh, to Sri Saraswati and Sri Guru Maharaj, to the family deity, to Sri Sita Ramchandra, my most humble obeisance. I bow in reverence to the most venerable Guru, Sri Sainath. In the 2 chapters following the invocation of the divine, the object of the book has been stated and for whom it is meant, and its relationship with the subject of the book, and has also been sufficiently explained. Now listen to the reason why these saints have to descend on this earth, or in other words, what is the difficult task that necessitates their incarnating in human form on this earth. O my revered listeners, I am but a speck of dust from your feet, and am not ashamed of entreating you for the favor of your attention. Delightful indeed is the life story of a saint, and in that this the nectar sweet story of Sai's life. May his faithful devotees think of it deeply and fill it with joy and be filled with joy. When the Brahmins disregard the rules of conduct laid down by the Varnashram, and the Shudras aspire to become the Brahmins, when the Acharyas, the religious heads, are shown disrespect to the extent of trying to castigate them, when no one follows the religious precepts, everyone regarding himself as learned and wise, each one trying to score over the other, but no one prepared to listen to anyone. When there is a total disregard to what is proper or improper for use in general as to food, and also a disregard to the code of conduct prescribed by the religion, so that the Brahmins themselves consume meat and spirituous uh, liquors openly in front of everyone, and under the cover of dharma secretly perpetuate oppression and tyranny, stoking the embers of hatred between religious sects, all of which exasperates the common folk. When the Brahmins shirk the daily rituals of asana, Sandhyasana, the orthodox tire of performing ceremonies and rituals for the propitiation of gods, and the yogis neglect yogic practices of chanting the name, meditation, and penance, then the time is ripe for the appearance of saints on earth. When the men look upon wealth, honor, wife, and children as only source of happiness, and turn away from the spiritual path, then it is that the saints appear on this earth. When people fail to attain the highest goal of human life due to laxity in observing Dharma, then for the revival of Dharma, the saints incarnate in human form. When the people dissipate their energies in physical pleasures of the palate and sex to the detriment of health, longevity, and prosperity, and miss the chance of upliftment altogether, then the saints appear on the earth. For the preservation of Varnashram Dharma and the eradication of uprightness to the protection of the poor, the meek, and the suffering is the incarnation of saints on earth. Essentially, the saints themselves are emancipated souls engaged in the upliftment of the meek and the lowly all the time. Their avatar is only for the benefit of others, for they have no selfish interests. They lay down a firm foundation of renunciation around the shaky structure of the worldly life to erect the temple of spirituality, thus redeeming the devotees effortlessly. They accomplished their religious mission of the revival of Dharma, thereby fulfilling their purpose, after which they give up their mortal coil. Jivatma, that is the individual soul, is the supreme spirit or God himself who brings joy to the whole world, and the God is the Guru himself who confers happiness and weal. He is also the abode of transcendental love. He is a constant, eternal, and undifferentiated whole. He is beyond space, time, and causality and is indivisible. He is basically the prime number from my point of view. I think of prime numbers who are indivisible, whole, and they are godlike. I know this is apart from the scriptures, but or what is written in the book, but yeah. Speech in all its four stages, namely Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikhari, has failed to describe him. Nor have the Vedas, with all their wisdom, have been able to do so, and have accepted defeat under the cover of Neti Neti. Not this, not this. The Shat Darshanas and the Shat Shastras are shamed into silence. The Puranas and Kirtanas also too are exhausted in their attempts at description. Ultimately, the only means that is left is to make obeisance, surrendering to Him with all your action, speech, and thought. Listening to the story of such a saint as Sai, which is filled with his marvelous leelas and sacred tales. May our ears be purified. He is the moving impulse of all the sense organs and has given me the inspiration to write this book. It is he who, prompting this life story, has come so effortlessly in an orderly manner. He dwells in the hearts of all and moves at will in this universe, within and without. Why then should I worry needlessly? As one recollects his many excellent qualities, one after the other the mind stands still. How then can words describe him? Absolute silence is the only way to describe. The nose smells the fragrance of a flower. The skin experiences the hot and cold touch. The eyes feast on the beauty. Each brings pleasure to itself. The tongue, no doubt, experiences the sweetness of sugar, but cannot convey the experience to others. In the same way, I know not how to describe the virtues of Sai. Only when the Sadguru himself so wishes, he will inspire his own chosen ones to describe most aptly, in great detail, that which is otherwise beyond description. These words are not superficial, a mere formality, but spring from the feelings of from the heart. Hence, I crave your respectful attention. As Gangapur and Narsimhawadi, as Audumbar and Belawadi, so is Shirdi a famous place of pilgrimage on the banks of the holy river Godavari. Oh, for the sacred banks of the Godavari and her holy waters. Oh, for the cool breezes that play on her surface. These dispel the darkness of ignorance from the worldly life indeed. The greatness of the Godavari, which is so well known in the whole world, is most impressive. Great saints, one more eminent than the other, came from there. Many other places of pilgrimages on the banks of this Gomati, which are described in the Puranas, and the water from which not only washes away the sins but also liberates from the sorrows of this life. When drunk or bathed in the same Godavari, as she wheels her way by Kopargaon in the Kopargaon Taluka in the Ahmednagar district, guides the pilgrims to Shirdi. Crossing over to the opposite bank of Godavari as the Tonga enters Nimgaon, which is about 6 miles from the river bank, Shirdi comes into within sight, right in front. Nivriti, Jnandev, Muktabai, Namdev, Janabai, Gora, Gonai, Tukaram, Narhari, Narsibhai, Sajan, Kasai, Savata, Mali. These have been saints of yore and saints that have been even in the recent past. These virtuous saints have regarded the world as one family and have been given the refuge of the and have been the refuge of the afflicted and the suffering. The great Saint Ramdas left the banks of the Godavari to appear on the banks of Krishna for the salvation of the world. In the same way, Sai, the greatest amongst yogis, appeared near Godavari by the great good fortune of Shirdi and for the deliverance of the world. Paris, or the philosopher's stone, turns a piece of iron into gold by its touch, and Paris, I think it's called. And the analogy of the Paris is used to describe the saints. So remarkable are the ways of the saints that they transform their devotees, completely raising them to their exalted state, transcending all distinctions to see the Brahman reflected in the entire universe. Animate, inanimate, to regard the glory of this creation as the undivided glory of Brahman. And in this way, when the true knowledge, the realization that the whole universe is nothing but I am that I am, comes, who that can then describe the glorious feeling of joy that it will bring. He, the seeker, will attain to a high state of purity and goodness. When such oneness of the self with the universe is experienced, so that nothing is known which is other than the self, then to whom can one be hostile and of whom afraid? As Damaji in Mangal Veda, Samartha Ramdas at Sajangarh, Narasimha Saraswati at Wadi, so was Sainath, the saint of Shirdi. Extremely difficult to accomplish to cross over as this worldly life is. He who has conquered it is adorned by peace, who is the treasure of knowledge personified. A retreat for the Vaishnavas, the most benevolent among the benevolent Karna, incarnate in bestowing spiritual wisdom such as the Sai, the quintessence of truth. Without attachment to the transient, absorbed totally in the self, and intent on attaining the highest goal of human life, how can this state of his being be described? The worldly state holds for him no prosperity or poverty, nor does he rejoice or grieve for the pleasures of the other world. His inner being is crystal clear as a mirror, the speech always a shower of nectar. He in whose eyes a king, a pauper, the poor, the meek are all equal, who knows not respect or disrespect towards his own self. He is himself the all pervading God. He moved and conversed with the common folk and watched with them the dancing, the gesticulating of the Muralis, and he nodded appreciatively as he listened to the songs and the ghazals, and yet his samadhi was unperturbed. Allah's name constantly on his lips is a sign to recognize him in the dark nights of all beings. He awoke to the light, and what was day to other beings was night for him. Inwardly, he was as tranquil as the sea. To which ashram, stage of life he belonged was something beyond human speculation, for he followed no code of conduct laid down for specific ashrams. Usually, he does not leave his place, and yet he knows everything that is happening everywhere. Though outwardly he held a splendid darbar, that is a royal court, regularly and related 1,001 stories, yet inwardly he was committed to silence. Leaning against the wall, he could stand and would go on his rounds morning and afternoon to Lendi or Chowdi, yet his state of self absorption was constant. I know not in which birth or what occasion, at what time, in what manner I must have undertaken penance that Sai should have taken me under his wing thus. Wicked from the birth that I am, how can I ever claim this to be the fruit of my penance? Nay, it is Sai himself who loves the meek and the lowly. Surely this is nothing but his grace. Though born a Siddha, his behavior was that of a sadhaka or a seeker. By nature, unconceited, very humble, he strove to please all. As Eknath to Paithan, Gyaneshwar to Alandi, so did Sri Sai bring glory to the soil of Shirdi. Blessed are the stones and the blades of grass in Shirdi which without effort kissed Baba's feet every day and held the sacred dust from his feet on their head. Shirdi itself is a Pandharpur, Shirdi a Jagannath Puri, a Dwarka. Shirdi alone is a Gaya, Kashi Vishweshwar, and even a Rameshwar is in Shirdi. Shirdi alone is a Badrikedar, a Nasik Trimbakeshwar, Ujjain Mahakaleshwar, and also Mahabaleshwar Gokarna. These are all the places that people go for pilgrimage. So, Shirdi alone is a Badri Kedar. So, Sai's sacred company in Shirdi is our Agam, scriptures on which temple worship is mainly founded. That's called Agam. Nigam is the Dharma Shastras. That itself is the assuagement of the sufferings and the pain of the worldly life and the easiest way to deliverance. Samarth Sai's darshan is for us the yoga sadhan, and conversing with him is the washing away of our sins. Pressing his feet softly is as the sacred bath at the confluence of the three rivers Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. And partaking of the holy water of his feet means the eradication of all desires. His command to us is an aphorism of the Vedas or the Gospel's truth. And eating his udi and prasad is sanctifying in every sense of the word. Sai alone is to us the Supreme Brahman. In him our highest goal of human life. Sai himself is Sri Krishna, Sri Rama, and he is our eternal refuge. Sai is beyond the pair of opposites such as joy, sorrow, anger, love, etc. He is never elated or depressed, but always absorbed in the self and forever the ultimate reality. But Shirdi was only the center from which emanated Baba's influence widely to Punjab, to Calcutta, to Gujarat, to Deccan, to Karnataka, to all over India. Sai Samadhi at Shirdi is a place for the gathering of all saints. Where one takes one way, the bondage of the worldly life breaks down at every step. A mere darshan of his Samadhi is truly a fulfillment of this human birth. How then can I describe the great good fortune of those who have spent their entire lives in his service? On the mosque, on the Wada, the Samadhi Mandir, rows of beautiful flags flutter high up in the sky as if to beckoning the devotees with their hands. Baba became renowned as a Mahant or Sadhu. His fame spread from village to village. Some prayed to him, taking vows with true faith. Some gained peace of mind by his darshan alone. Whatever the thoughts in anybody's mind, be they pure or vile, the minds experience peace and calm by his darshan. In their hearts, people were simply amazed. Sorry, I have to drink water or else I'll start coughing. The marvelous experience of darshan of Vittal Rakhumai in Pandharpur was given by Baba to his devotees in Shirdi. Should anyone think this is an exaggeration, let them hear the words of Gaul, Gauli Bua, a dedicated devotee of Vithal to remove their doubts. He was a Varkari from Pandharpur, who out of his devotion to Baba came to Shirdi once a year as regularly he went to Pandharpur. With a donkey and for companion a disciple, Bua set out on the pilgrimage with a constant chant of Ram Krishna Hari on his lips. 95 years of age, he spent the Chaturmas on the banks of Ganga and the remaining 8 months at Pandharpur, which made him possible to meet Baba once a year during these journeys. Gazing into Baba's face, he would become humble and exclaim, "This truly is Pandharinath incarnate, the refuge of the friendless, and the destitute and all merciful one." Does one become a saint merely by wearing a dhoti with a silk border? No, indeed. Here one has to wear out one's bones, turn one's blood into water by one's own arduous efforts. How can one become God for nothing? But truly he Sai, he alone is Pandhari Rao, with a firm belief that this world is illusory, perceive the divinity behind it. When such are the words of a great devotee of God who is dedicated to the worship of Pandharinath, then what experience can a base, lowly creature like me have? Let the listeners experience this for themselves. With a great fondness of chanting God's name, Baba repeated Allah Malik ceaselessly and would make his devotees hold the Nam Saptaha, a week-long chanting of the name in front of him, which would go on day and night continuously. One day, Das Ganu was commanded to start the Nam Saptaha, and Das Ganu said, "Yes, but Vitthal must appear before me." Laying his hand on his heart, Baba peremptorily said, "Yes, Vitthal will appear in form before you. Only the devotee must have faith enough." Dankapuri, Dakur in Gujarat of Dakurnath, or Pandharpur of Vithalaraya, or Dwarka of Ranchod. Everything is in Shirdi itself. You do not have to seek it far. After all, Vitthal is going to appear from a secret place. Moved by the intense love of his devotees, he will incarnate in this very place for you. By his devoted service to his old parents, Pundalik had won over the Lord of the Lords, who stood resting on a single brick just for the love and devotion of Pundalik. And so, as a Saptaha came to an end, it is said that Das Ganu did have the Vitthal Darshan in Shirdi itself. So much for the truth of Baba's words. Once Kaka Sahib Dikshit was sitting in meditation after his early morning bath, as was his daily practice, when he had the darshan of Vitthal. Later he went for Baba's darshan, see the wonder of what Baba said to him. "So Vitthal Patil had come, isn't it? And you met him, I'm sure. But mind you, Vitthal is very elusive. Hold on to him fast and fix him in place forcibly, or else he'll give you the slip if you are inattentive, even for a moment." But this was the incident of the morning. While later in the day, as the sun came overhead at noon, see how there was yet another proof of the glorious vision of Vitthal. Someone from the other village came to Shirdi, bringing with him quite a few pictures of Vithoba of Pandharpur, with the intention of selling them. Dikshit was simply amazed to find them the exact replicas of Vitthal, who had appeared to him during his meditation that morning. Baba's words came at once to his mind. With great love, Dikshit bought one of the pictures and, paying the price to the seller with great devotion, installed it for puja. Listen now to yet another fascinating story which once again brings out Sai's reverence towards this worship of Vittal. One Bhagwant Rao Shirsagar, whose father was a great devotee of Vittal, used to go to Pandharpur very often. There was an idol of Vittal for daily puja in his house. But after the father's death, puja, food offerings, everything stopped. Even the annual rites and ceremonies for the dead ancestors were forgotten. Not a word was uttered during about the annual visit to Pandharpur. When Bhagwant Rao came to Shirdi, Baba remembered his father. He's saying that he was my friend. And since he as in Bhagwant Rao is the son of that friend, I have dragged him over to Shirdi. He makes no food offerings to the gods anymore. He keeps me hungry too, even Vittal. He has kept without food. So I have brought him to Shirdi. I shall now remind him about everything and thus make him perform the daily puja. On one occasion, knowing how it is the special opportune time of Parvakal, Das Ganu wished to take a dip in the river at Prayag and came to Baba for his permission. Baba replied, there was no need to travel so far for that. Shirdi itself is a Prayag. Let there be firm faith in your mind. And indeed, what a marvel of marvels. Even as he placed his hand on Baba's feet, water trickled down from both his toes. Twin streams of the holy Ganga and the Yamuna oozed out in a trickle. At the sight of this miracle, Das Ganu was choked with emotion. How great was Baba's favor! It moved him to tears of joy and gratitude. Love brimmed up in his heart and stirred him to a poetic utterance, which found its satisfaction only after describing Baba's boundless powers and incomprehensible leelas in verse. Charming is this Das Ganu's Pada, and to satisfy the listener's eager desire to hear it, I give it here in this appropriate juncture, the sublime song as promised earlier. O Sadguru, boundless is your power, marvelous your leelas, to ferry the dull and ignorant across the ocean of life. You are forever the ark, Veni Mahadev, you became and brought Prayag at your feet, only to make Ganga Yamuna flow from your toes. The lotus born, that is Brahma, the consort of Lakshmi, that is Vishnu, Sri Hari, that is Shankar, the quintessence of three gunas, you yourself become. O Sainath, as you walk on this earth, wisdom of Brahma pours out of your words sometimes. Sometimes you assume the terrible form of Shiva to show tamas. Like Sri Krishna, you indulge sometimes in childish pranks, and at times you are the fabled swan on the lake of your devotees' hearts. If a Muslim, sandalwood paste was dear to you like Hindu, but if a Hindu, how happily you stayed always in the mosque. To call you wealthy, you went your rounds begging for alms. Should you be a fakir, your munificence has even put Kuber to shame. If the mosque be your boat, there is always fire, burning in the dhuni to provide udi to the people. From dawn gather the faithful to worship you, till the sun is at zenith and the midday aarti is performed. All around the devotees stand as the divine attendants on God, holding the Chauri Chamar to wave softly over your head. Cornets respond, clarions make melody, bells clang aloud. As the chopper, impressive with his bell, stands at the door, proclaiming your glory, on your resplendent seat, you are as Lord Vishnu during Aarti. But you are Shankar, destroyer of the Cupid, as you sit before the dhuni in the evenings. Such Leelas of the Trinity we experience in you day after day, O Baba Sai. Even so, my mind wanders idly. To steady it is all I pray to you. Vilest among the vile, a great sinner that I am, seeking refuge at your feet, I come avert the threefold afflictions of Das Ganu, O Guru Arya. People go to the Ganga to wash away the terrible sins. Ganga herself takes refuge at the saint's feet to cleanse her own sins. Over here they wrote Ganges, but I'm going to call her Ganga because we know she's Ganga, not Ganges. Leaving Sai's holy feet, we need not go on a pilgrimage to Ganga or Godavari. It is enough to listen to this hymn to a saint, this fascinating story of Sai with a devout heart. Thus, by great fortune, Gonai found Nama in Bhima river. Tamal found Kabir in an oyster shell in Bhagirathi. So also Srinath first appeared for his devotees in Shirdi village under a neem tree at the tender age of 16. Even at his first appearance, he was a Brahmagyani, untouched even in his dreams by sensual desire. Maya he had abandoned totally, moksha rolled at his feet. In which country, which righteous family, or in which parental abode Baba took birth, this no one knew. No one knew his antecedents, who was his father, who was his mother. All were exhausted asking him questions, but were none the wiser for all that, abandoning his father, mother, friends, relations, caste, and descent. In fact, renouncing the whole worldly life, he appeared in Shirdi for the benefit of the people. An old lady of Shirdi, Nana Chopda's mother, would often talk about the marvel of Baba's way and of his behavior. In the beginning, she said, this lad, fair and handsome, was first seen sitting calmly in deep meditation under a neem tree. When they saw this comely youth, people were quite astonished to see him performing such arduous penance at that tender age. So much that the scorching heat or bitter cold were to him the same. Such tender age, oh, what severe austerity! The villagers were simply amazed to see it. People from the neighboring villages thronged Shirdi to have the boy's darshan. Company he kept none during the day, nor was he afraid of anything or anyone by the night. Where could this lad have come from was one question that puzzled everyone's mind. So comely was his face, so handsome, so the form. Looking at him, love welled in the heart. He never visited anyone but remained under the neem tree day and night. Everyone was mystified. How extraordinary was this lad, such tender age, so sweet, youthful a countenance. And how could he stay out in the open day and night? Outwardly but a young boy, yet in his demeanor he surpassed even the greatest amongst men, the incarnation of the perfect renunciation. They could not stop wondering. A strange thing then happened one day. A few persons were possessed by the spirit of the deity Khandoba. In their frenzy, they started puffing and gasping and panting, emitting loud, deep sounds. So people began to ask them questions. To which fortunate parents does this boy belong? From where and how has he come from here up to here, O Khandoba? At least you find the answers for us. One of them said to the god. The god said, go get a hose, strike at the spot that I show you. Strike here with your hose and you will get your answer about this lad. And then in the same spot near the enclosing wall of the village, under the same neem tree, they struck a blow up with their hose until they came upon some bricks. The layer of the bricks over, they found a underground cell with 4 metal lamps burning in it, the entrance of it which was closed by a quern stone. The cell was paved with limestone and contained a wooden seat, a gomukhi with beautiful rosary. The god Then the god said, "For 12 years this boy undertook penance at this spot." All the people were wonderstruck at this and started plying the boys with probing questions, but the lad was full of playful mischief and told them a story. This is my guru, told them a story total, altogether different. "This is my guru's seat," said he, "my most sacred legacy. Listen to me this once and preserve it as it is." So said Baba, and said the listeners who were present then. But why is it? Why is? But why is this? My tongue moved to say that Baba was giving it in a different turn. I was amazed at myself. Why should I think in such terms about Baba? But now I have realized that this must have been his spontaneous sense of humor. Baba dearly loved a joke. Maybe the cell was his own dwelling. But what does one lose in saying that it is his guru's? How does its importance suffer? And so on his orders, the cell was once again sealed as his guru's seat by restoring the bricks to their former position. The neem tree was to Babas as great, as sacred as the uh, Ashwatha, that is a people tree, or the Audumbar tree. He loved the neem dearly and greatly revered it. Mahalsapati and the other old residents of Shirdi bow to this place as a samadhi of Baba's Guru. It is common knowledge among the villagers that Baba sat near the samadhi in meditation, observing total silence for a period of 12 years. Sate Sahib, one of Baba's devotees, acquired the land all around it, along with the samadhi and the neem tree, raising a building with 4 verandas connecting at the center. This building, this very vada, was originally the common residence of the pilgrims, forever crowded with comings and goings of the visitors. Sate raised a bank around the neem tree and an upper floor running north south. When the northern staircase was laid, he pointed out the cell. Under the staircase, facing south, is a beautiful niche. In front of it, facing north, the devotees sit on the bank. On Thursdays and Fridays, he who washes the floor with cow dung at sunset and burns incense for a moment, Sri Hari will surely bless him. Listeners may doubt in their minds whether this is true or an exaggeration. But these are the words of Sai's mouth, which I have heard with my own ears. This is no statement of my own making. Have not the slightest doubt. Those who have personally heard this are still amongst us. Later came Dikshitwara, which provided spacious accommodation, and in the forepart a stone building was also built, very shortly thereafter by Sri Bhutti. Dikshit was already well known for his virtuous deed and the very embodiment of faith and devotion. The seeds of his spiritual progress were sown during his sojourn to England. Here the listeners may well ask, how instead of the holy places of pilgrimage like Mathura, Kashi, Dwarka, could England have, which was proscribed by the then Hindu custom, be the beginning of his spiritual journey? And it is quite natural for the listeners to raise this doubt, but all my listeners should forgive me for a slightest digression in answering it, which in fact they will appreciate. Dikshit had already accumulated enough religious merit by his pilgrimages to the holy places of Kashi, Prayag, Badri Kedar, Mathura, Vrindavan, Dwarkapur, etc. Moreover, by his father's virtuousness, his own extraordinary good fortune, and a desert of accumulated merits of his past births, he had the darshan of Sri Sai. The immediate cause for this darshan was his lameness, decreed as if by fate. For while in England his foot slipped and resulted in an infirmity of the leg. To all appearances, a misfortune. It was really an auspicious and rare event, which led to his association with Sai. It was indeed the fruit of all his good deeds. Dikshit appeared to meet Chandorkar, from whom he came to know of Sai's fame. Chandorkar said, "You must see the marvel of his darshan. Your lameness will disappear immediately." But it was not so much the infirmity of the leg that Dikshit considered to be a deficiency. The real infirmity, he said, is of the mind, which he beseeched Sai to remove. What is this human frame but a bag of flesh, bones, blood, and skin? A mere cartload of all the transient worldly affairs. It mattered little even if the lameness remained in the foot, in the leg. It was in the year 1909, on the second day of November, that Dikshit for the first time had Sai's sacred darshan. In the same year again, he went again to Shirdi in the month of December to have Sai's darshan once again, and this time he really felt that he should stay there for a longer period. At first, a thought came to his mind that he should sell some of his 25 of his company shares to build a shed with corrugated iron sheets for the roof so that it would be useful for the pilgrims. Later on, he resolved in his mind to build a vada instead. And in the next year, the foundation stone for it was laid to make the auspicious beginning of the building work. The day was December night. Baba's consent was obtained, and taking it to be the auspicious sign, the work of laying the foundation stone was accomplished. As luck would have it, Dikshit's brother, who would not have come normally even on invitation, appeared to be there on the same day and at that auspicious moment. Dada Sahib Kharpade had come to Shirdi alone much earlier and was in some difficulty over getting Baba's permission to return home. Both of them got Baba's permission. Kharpade to go home and Dikshit to lay the foundation of the stone on 10th of December. Nothing can happen without Baba's permission, so remember that. You cannot even go to Shirdi without Baba's permission. This day is significant for yet another reason. From this very day was started with great love and devotion Baba's Aarti before he retired for the night at the Chowdi. Later in the year 1911, the auspicious occasion of Ram Navami was availed of for the Griha Pravesh. With all the rituals and ceremonials later on still, Bhutti's Vada was built. With lavish expenditure, Baba was laid to rest in it after his Mahasamadhi, so that all the money was well spent. Now there were 3 Vadas in all, where earlier there was none, but in those early days it was Sate's Vada that was most useful to everyone. This Sate Vada is important for another reason too. In the beginning, on the very spot, there was a beautiful flower garden grown by Baba with his own hand. A short account of this garden will be given in the next chapter. Hemad, with his listeners, bows humbly at Sai's feet. Vaman Tatya, the potter, would supply the earthen pitchers, and Sai Samarth would water the plants, thus raising a garden on the rocky, barren soil. Later, Baba just disappeared one day. Afterwards, he met Chand Patil near Aurangabad with the marriage party. He returned to Shirdi. Thereafter, he met Devi Das, he met Janki Das too, and also Ganga Gir. These threesome then got together in Shirdi. The incident of Baba's wrestling with Moinuddin then took place, and then afterwards Baba came to stay at the mosque. He grew fond of Dengle and gradually other devotees gathered around him. All these stories will be narrated in the next chapter, which can be listened to attentively. Hemad now prostrates before Sai as he takes refuge at his feet. Weal be to all. Here ends the fourth chapter of Sri Sai Samarth called Descent of Sai Samartha in Shirdi, as aspired by the saints and virtuous, and the composition of his by and composed by his devotee Hemad Pant. So yes, thank you, Baba. Om Sai Ram. Thank you for helping me read this chapter. See you again.